Purdue's back in Mackey in a big time bounce back spot. The second of those this year. Kind of well, somewhat in uncharted territory for Purdue, coming off of a tough road loss to UCLA, and it is probably, I think, the biggest game of the season for Purdue so far. It's right up there with Iowa State. Illinois is a super talented team coming into Mackey, and this one means just a little bit more because it's a conference opponent. This is an Illinois team that's kind of getting hot at the right time, but it would be hard pressed to talk about this matchup without kind of talking about some of the injuries surrounding it. Illinois, kind of star, I guess stars loose word, but really, really elite player and Kylan Boswell, one of the elite perimeter defenders in the country, will not be playing in this game. And we've talked about Braden Smith being a little bit banged up, so this will be a matchup of two teams that won't be 100%, I don't believe, but it should be a good game nonetheless. Two teams, the two best offenses in the sport, so should have a lot of fireworks. What do you make of this matchup for Purdue, Ethan?
This is an interesting one because on paper, these are the two best offenses in the country. Purdue's offensive efficiency has dipped a little bit as they've subbed a little on the West Coast, but are still second in offense to Illinois, who is just barely edging them out at the moment for that number one spot. So if you're looking for fireworks, this is the perfect game. This should be a pretty well executed game on both sides offensively, especially because both defenses probably fall into the bucket of good, not great. And lately, both have taken a little bit of a dip. Purdue's defense, in particular, has not been great since the calendar flipped to 2026. And Illinois' defense is very passive. We'll get more into the schematic stuff a little bit later, but I think Purdue fans will recognize a lot of their defensive tendencies. Given these teams play pretty similar brands of defense, they want to rebound on the defensive glass. Neither of them force a lot of turnovers. They mostly just want to be out there and try and force tougher shots versus being super active pressure defenses. And as such, I think both offenses will get a lot of space to operate and get the shots they want.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it, like super calm defense that Illinois plays. They're literally the worst team in the country at forcing turnovers. Their turnover rate defensively is 365th nationally, and steal percent being 362nd makes sense as well with that. It's just a team that doesn't really try and turn you over at all. But with that, they also don't foul. They're the best team in the country at foul rate defensively. And, as you mentioned, they're kind of just out there a little bit defensively. But you mentioned kind of how both teams have slipped a little bit in the new year. Sorting the data on Torvik, this two teams, it shows that the data shows that Purdue's 18th nationally. Their defense has been 56th nationally in the span since the new year. Illinois in that same time frame is they're eighth. They're kind of more true to their season long metrics, but their defense is 23rd. The offense is fourth. It's very highly performing. Two good but not great defenses and two very elite offenses should make for not a whole lot of resistance. Especially two defenses that don't really pressure you and make you uncomfortable and kind of just let you run your stuff. That's good news to each offense, I think, that is more than happy to oblige and just run their actions.
Yeah, you mentioned Kylan Boswell is going to be out of this game for Illinois, and that's a huge blow. He's anywhere from their second to fourth best player, depending on how you categorize some of the other players we'll talk about here in a minute. But he's their third leading scorer, just a tenth of a point behind their second leading scorer. He averages 4 rebounds, 3.5 assists a game, and he's their best perimeter defender. There's no exaggerating what this guy does for Illinois. To put it in Purdue terms, it's a little bit like losing the defensive impact of CJ Cox and the offensive role burden, maybe scoring burden of like Fletcher Lawyer, though he's not as much of a shooter. I mean, that's who Illinois is missing in this game. And it's a big benefit to Purdue because Boswell would have taken the Braden Smith assignment. Now that's a little bit more in question about who they're going to have as the primary defender on Braden. Most likely that's going to be Andrei Stojakovic, who has the tools to be bothersome to Braden. He's kind of in the mold of guys who have given Braden problems in the past. Just this taller, longer defender. Braden will be the first to tell you he's the tallest guy out there on the court, and sometimes those guys with that extra length can really bother his sight lines and kind of force him to give the ball up a little bit more than he'd like to.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be a tough matchup for Braden, I think, just because it really likely is Stojakovic taking that assignment. And even if it's not, I mean, it's a team that against Maryland with Boswell out, started Wagler, Davis, and Stojakovic in the backcourt, and that backcourt, the smallest guy I believe is Keaton Wagler at 6'6". So no matter how you slice it, like there's going to be some real size on the court for Braden. It's going to be kind of up to him to handle that. I think the good news is that part of what makes the length so difficult to deal with for Braden typically is the high amounts of pressure that come with it. Like I think back to the Memphis game, and I think it was it Zach Davis was his name. I think they started a guy who hadn't started all year.
Whoever it
Six
was wasn't on the scouting report.
Yeah, wasn't on the scouting report, as Fletcher Lawyer so kindly pointed out. Um, Regardless, he hadn't started all year. They started to get a little extra length on Braden, and he picked him up 94 feet, and that was kind of one of those things where it was very intentional in pressuring the ball and kind of trying to force turnovers for Braden. I'm interested to see how much the length really bothers him if there's not a point to use it to pressure. Because if the length isn't really pressuring Braden, I don't think it bothers him a whole lot because he's more than happy to shoot over you. He's going to get to his spots. And I think if you're not really pressuring him, he's going to be able to pick you apart passing wise. And that's where he's at his best. And I think that's where the Purdue offense is at their best. So it's going to be a really interesting kind of tug of war between how much the length affects it with how much the pressure allows Braden to operate.
Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned that this Illinois defensive scheme might be familiar to Purdue fans. They do run very similar defensive schemes, except they don't have a Braden Smith type who's sort of hunting steals in the backcourt, and they don't have a CJ Cox type who's pressuring 94 feet. They do have a lot more positional size than Purdue, and they're basically trying to tell teams like, hey, just shoot over us. We're going to contest every shot. They're really good at running teams off the 3-point line. They force teams into long twos. And as we all know, Purdue has a lot of players very eager to take those long twos. So I think Illinois is going to be able to force Purdue into some of the shots they want Purdue to take, and Purdue's going to feel very comfortable taking those shots because they can make them. I don't think Illinois is going to do anything to try and disrupt like the Braden minis, Fletch coming off those pin downs and coming around, even CJ Cox kind of hunting his own shot, or Trey Coffin-Wren doing his little 12 to 15 foot push shot. I think those are all the shots Illinois wants to take, and those might not be the most efficient shots Purdue's offense generates, but they're very comfortable playing in that spot on the floor if teams are going to give that shot up.
Yeah, I mean they're a solid defense when it comes to like 3-point percentage, so they definitely do a decent job of contesting. This isn't a situation where it's like, oh, we want to force a lot of threes. It's just wide open threes. This team really does kind of live by the like, we're going to contest. Like you can shoot it, but we're going to contest. And it's definitely the shot they want to give up. I think part of it is that this team doesn't start a fantastic rim protector in Tomislav Ivisic. His brother Zvonimir, Big Z, who comes off the bench, is a much better rim protector than he is, and it's kind of it's a little bit of like a Jacobson-esque situation where Zvonimir comes off the bench and he's really the sole rim protector on this team, and a big reason why this 2-point defense has been as good as it's been. But in the starting lineup that they play the majority of the time, they don't really have a plus rim protector out. And I think there's a little bit of like, you can kind of get what you want at the rim to an extent if you're physical and able to finish through some length. But there's not a real shot blocking factor, in my opinion, in the starting lineup of this Illinois team. And I think it's a little bit similar to Purdue, in which you can kind of score through these guys. Like I think you haven't really seen it very often because they haven't played a ton of teams with super true post scorers besides like UConn and Texas Tech. I think you can kind of go through these Illinois bigs a little bit. So maybe some Trey Kaufman-Wren, some Oscar Clough post touches early in this game, trying to establish yourself inside and see what happens.
Yeah, that's a great kind of transition to, I think, the key for this matchup, and that's the front court battle, because both teams have pretty unique front courts that excel in different areas and are going to be mismatches on opposite ends of the floor for each other. You mentioned they don't have a ton of rim protection. Big Z, Zvonimir Ivisic, is a good rim protector, more reliable than Jacobson is to this point in his career, though Zvonimir has been in college a few years longer. But Tomislav, not much of a rim protector. Mirkovic is a good defender, but not really a blocks guy. So at that point, Purdue should be able to get what they want inside. Jacobson is probably going to get pushed around a little bit. I think we're all used to that at this point. But Trey Kaufman-Wren and Oscar Clough should be able to get what they want at the rim if Purdue is dedicated to going to them. And Illinois is one of the best 2 point defenses in the country. I think as much as they're going to allow some longer twos, those are not efficient shots. And if those aren't falling early, or even if they are, this could be a game to really punish the mismatch inside. Defensively, Illinois' bigs are not comfortable in the post. They don't like having to play super physical around the basket, and that's where Clough and Chekhov and Wren excel. That's where they're most comfortable, and it could also be an emphasis for Purdue to try and get them in some foul trouble because on the other end of the floor, Illinois is basically UCLA on steroids in terms of what their bigs can do and how they can present problems for Purdue. We just watched UCLA absolutely shred Purdue in ball screen offense, pick and pop, where Bilodeau and Booker were setting screens, bouncing to the 3-point line. Purdue was trying to use their centers and even Trey when he was on the floor to hedge that ball screen, and they weren't fast enough to recover. And they left Booker, who's a low volume 3-point shooter, but a good one when he does take them, and Bilodeau, who's a good 3-point shooter on volume, especially for a big, wide open for as many looks as they wanted that game. Illinois does that even better than UCLA does. Their bigs, whether that's Mirkovic, Zvonimir Ivisic, or Tomislav Ivisic, excuse me. All three of them are 37% 3-point shooters on decent volume. They're perfectly comfortable. I mean, Illinois takes among the highest percentage of their shots from three in the country, more than Purdue does by a pretty significant margin. They're perfectly comfortable setting up at the 3-point line. And if Purdue's going to play the same defensive game plan they did against UCLA, they're going to get absolutely torched in that action.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Like as you talked about, the 3-point rate's almost 50%. Like it's a team that shoots about half their shots from three. I do think it's important to note, though, this is a 2-point defense, I think, in my opinion, that's been bolstered by not playing some of the best front courts in the sport. I think when I look at it, this team has really played one like high level front court when it comes to interior scoring, and that's Texas Tech. And that Texas Tech team dominated them inside. It was a 4-point win for Illinois, and I think part of that is Texas Tech just isn't quite as good all around. But JT Toppin had 35 points on 16 for 23 from 2-point range, and Lawan Watts had 21 on 6 for 8. As a whole, Texas Tech shot 67% from 2-point range. I think this is a defense that some high-level interior scorers like a Trey Kaufman-Renn, like an Oscar Clough, that are highly efficient, elite finishers, guys with good hands, and guys that will be set up well by Braden Smith to be in a position to score the basketball, can have a lot of success. But as you talked about it's a really unique matchup on the other end because of how much those bigs shoot. Like we've talked about how we think you can kind of get yours at the rim, and inside against this defense of Tomislav Ivisic and David Mirkovic, but they're both shooting 37% from three. Like they're both good shooters. They're more than happy to stand on the perimeter. That screen, that pick and pop action that UCLA ran with Bilodeau, Illinois runs that probably more than UCLA does. I do think the one good or benefit, to playing Illinois personnel wise over UCLA is Donovan Dent is one of those guys that's just super quick with the ball in his hands. I mean, he's one of the fastest guards in the country. And I think that the good news is that Wagler's not that. He's good at getting downhill and getting to the rim. He's a super efficient guard. He's probably been better than Dent in large part for most of this year. He's not the guy. He's not the quickest guy, though. He's not going to beat you with a ton of burst off the bounce. And I think that with that in mind, you might see less of an attempt to hedge and keep Dent, from getting super downhill, or not Dent, Wagler, excuse me, from getting super downhill. And I think there's a little bit more room for error for the guards to be able to get around the screen and chase and get back in front. So I think it'll kind of be a chess match. I'm interested to see how Purdue guards it, because obviously I don't think many people would say that how they guarded UCLA worked very well, considering that action got UCLA whatever shot they wanted every time they ran it for the large part of that game. So it'll be interesting to see how Purdue kind of responds against a team that I think is a lot better and, has better role players around, so you can't focus on the action as much.
Yeah, this will be a test for Purdue's defense, I think, both in terms of their game plan and how they want to approach it, then also their personnel. Because really, no matter how you slice it, Clough and Jacobson are going to be a little bit vulnerable on the defensive end. Those guys are most comfortable around the rim, and Illinois bigs just don't play a ton around the rim when they're on offense. So they're going to try and pull those guys out of the paint, which is going to make Purdue's 2 point defense even more vulnerable than it already is. And this has been a bottom, what do you say, bottom 10 uh, 2 point defense since the turn of the calendar.
Yeah, since the
Um,
Kent State game, this Purdue defense ranks 360th nationally in 2 point percentage, 2 point
that
field goal
is
percentage defensively.
sixth worst in the entire Division One. That's not going to be made better by Clough and Trey Kaufman-Renn and Daniel Jacobson having to guard the Visich brothers and Merkovich on the perimeter. Illinois is going to try and use that action both to get open looks from three. Like if Purdue's not playing those guys close enough, they're going to fire away from three, and they can make those shots, especially if they have space. And even if Purdue's playing up on those guys, they're going to take advantage of that opportunity. They have a lot of guys that can put the ball on the floor and get downhill to the basket one-on-one. Now's probably a good time to talk about Andrei Stojakovic, who is one of the best players in the Big Ten at doing this. He is a one-on-one mismatch creator on offense. He's their worst shooter in the starting lineup, so I'm sure Purdue is probably going to try and sag off him and dare him to take those shots to try and counteract some of what he can do with the ball in his hands. But he's a great isolation scorer, and if Purdue's having to play him one-on-one without some bigs in the paint behind him, he can do some real damage getting downhill.
Yeah, I mean, Stojakovic is a really tough matchup. I think, especially when you look at Purdue's personnel, it's kind of like, who do you put on him? Because I think pretty confidently, I think I want CJ Cox on Wagler. I think that's the guy who's going to have the ball in his hands. I think he's the guy that makes Illinois go. But when you do that, it leaves you in this precarious position where you now have to put either Braden Smith, and not just Braden Smith, but a seemingly somewhat hobbled Braden Smith, or Fletcher Lawyer on Andrei Stojakovic, who has some pitfall or some downfalls as a shooter and whatnot, but at his best is one of the best isolation scorers in the country. Like it's a guy who I think he averaged like 20 a game last year at Stanford. This is a guy who's an elite downhill player. He can get to the rim kind of at will, almost against anybody in the country, let alone guys like Fletcher and Braden, who are going to be overwhelmed a little bit with his size. So it's going to be a really interesting cover. The one unique thing I would say about Stojakovic is it's this weird sort of idea that sometimes his volume isn't always the best thing for Illinois. I mean, we talked about he's a great isolation scorer, but with that, he takes a lot of tough twos. And I think at the end of the day, as long as it's a tough two and not a free layup, it's a shot that Purdue's okay with. That being said, going to be hard for Purdue to force a lot of tough twos when the bigs are pulled out of the paint by 37% 3-point shooters, and you don't have the greatest personnel to match up with Andre on the perimeter.
Yeah, like you said, if he's forcing him to fade away middies, then that's a win for the Purdue defense. He's great at getting to the rim one-on-one, though, especially against the sort of defenders that Purdue can throw at him. He's going to have the size advantage on pretty much everyone he faces. And if he doesn't, he's going to have a major quickness advantage against someone like Trey Kaufman-Renn. About the only player who can match up physically with him on this roster is ironically Jack Benter. And that's probably not a great spot for Purdue to be in when their defensive answer to one of Illinois' stars is Jack Benter. Which also leads me to something that we kind of talked about in the UCLA recap, so make sure to go check that out if you haven't seen it already. But this might not be the game for more Jack Benter unless they're going to be playing with a three, because Illinois has a ton of size on the interior. They play David Mirkovic, who I believe is 6'8" at the four as the starter, and the backup is Zvonimir Visic. They play a lot of twin towers, 2 7-footers together. Benter can probably at least be on the court opposite Mirkovic, though that's probably not an ideal matchup for him. We really don't want him checking either of Visich brother. I think that would be a major problem for Purdue, though it could create some offensive advantages if they really lean into that with the extra spacing and really forcing those bigs to be more mobile than maybe they're comfortable being.
Yeah, I mean, looking back at that Illinois versus Maryland game, the only data point we have without Kylan Boswell, this was really a 6-man rotation from Illinois. So the 5 starters that we mentioned, it's Wagler, Davis, and Stojakovic in the backcourt with Mirkovic and Big T in the front court. And then they bring Humrick House and Big Z off the bench. I guess it's 7. Z only played 9 minutes in this game. So I think it's going to be a 7-man rotation. They didn't really play Milo really very much at all. Um, Hummer gives you a little bit of positional versatility. You can slide him down to the 3 if you really want to and go really big. I agree with you. I do think this is a game that Jack Benner at the 3 is worthwhile because I think he might be the best matchup for Andrei Stojakovic defensively. And I think there's a world where if you see, whoever Stojakovic's matchup is defensively, I think it's probably going to be Fletch if I had to guess. And if that's the case, I mean, if he starts torching Fletch, I wouldn't be shocked to see Benter come in the first half and, kind of be asked to slow him down a little bit and force him into some tougher shots. And I think based on what we've seen the last few games out of Benter, I think he's capable of that. But it's going to take a lot of effort and, him playing at the 150% level that he's been playing at the last few games.
Illinois is literally the tallest team in college basketball, the tallest team in Division One. They are exceptionally tall. It's not one of those teams, a little bit like Memphis, where it's like, oh, they have a ton of size in the backcourt, but they're a little small in the front court. Or even like Purdue, that has a lot of size in the front court, but is very small in the backcourt. This team is big everywhere, and they're going to try and use that to their advantage and create some mismatches. Hummerkaus is 6'9". He played a 3 through 5. But I mean, he ran some small ball 5 last year. Illinois has the depth this year. They don't really need him to do that. But even if Purdue tries to try it out, Trey Kaufman ran at the 5 and Benter at the 4 to try and counter some of Illinois' size with like speed and spacing, they have the personnel to kind of adapt to that if they really need to. So this will be interesting, I think, chess battle between Brad Underwood, the Illinois head coach, and Matt Painter of both of these offenses can really attack the opposing defense in some unique ways, and how they try and counter that and minimize their defensive liabilities while trying to exploit their offensive openings is going to be really interesting to watch play out. But I think we've gone far enough in this preview without talking about Illinois' best player much. That is Keaton Wagler, who sensational freshman season. He has already won Big Ten Freshman of the Year. He could get hurt tomorrow and would still win the award, I think. He was a 3-star recruit. This is a very Purdue-like story, maybe a year early for Purdue. Usually Purdue likes those redshirt guys who come in the next year or whatever, but very Purdue-ian story, which is very unlike a Brad Underwood coached Illinois team, but a 3-star freshman, wasn't very heralded, who got a lot of buzz over the summer. It's like, well, this guy might be for real. And it was like, oh, maybe he's going to start. Maybe he'll be like a key piece off the bench. Maybe it's like a great shooter next to Kylan Boswell. And turns out he's just Illinois' best player and has already played himself into the NBA lottery. He's going to be a one and done, which is pretty crazy given what his recruiting was. And tell me a little bit about Wagler and how he can attack this Purdue defense.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really unique story. I think from what I know, I believe the like 3-star unranked guy came from, he just didn't play on any of the big AAU circuits. Like, I think it was a high school kid from Kansas who played high school ball in Kansas, and that was, kind of what he did. And he wasn't on the EYBL circuit. He wasn't on the Under Armour or the Puma circuit or anything like that. So it was hard to rank him accurately. And, he's turned himself into like a potential lottery pick. I mean, he's a 6'6" point guard. And when you mentioned they're the tallest team in the country, the smallest guy that really played meaningful minutes for them is Kylan Boswell at 6'2", 215. And he's not going to play. Wagler's probably the second smallest. He's going to be the smallest that plays meaningful minutes in this game. He's 6'6". He's 190 pounds. He's just so poised. Like, that's the most impressive thing, I think, in my opinion, about Wagler is that he's not even really a true point guard, I don't think. Like, I wouldn't project him in the NBA as a point guard. I don't think he really played the point in high school. And with Mihajlo Petrovic not quite being the guy I don't think Illinois thought he was going to be, and Illinois kind of needing a point guard a little bit, they turn to Wagler, and the decision-making is just so phenomenal. He operates in ball screen action like a veteran. He's a 3-level scorer, like in the truest sense, and the same idea that Braden operates in the mid-range and can get to the rim and hits the 3. Wagler can score on all 3 levels, and he's so crafty with his dribble. And he's 6'6". He can shoot over you. He has the ability to just kind of get to his spot. And it's such a poised game. It's going to be a really tough cover. And I think this is kind of a big spot for CJ Cox to restamp himself as one of the elite perimeter defenders in the country. I think that's kind of quieted down a little bit with some recent performances. I don't think the switching has helped that much. I would like to see kind of less switching and this be a good opportunity for CJ to really stamp his name again as one of the elite defenders and kind of make life really, really difficult on Wagler. I think he was the one guy that without Boswell had a tough game against Maryland. He was 4 for 12 from the field, 1 for 9 from three. Ended up with 13 points, but got to the free throw line 6 times. Hard, I mean, I guess he did have 13, 7, and 8, but a pretty inefficient shooting night. It's going to be a tough cover for CJ, one of his toughest, if not his toughest on the year. It's a really tough matchup, and I'm kind of interested to see it play out. I think it'll be a fun one.
Yeah, Wagler's been phenomenal, and he's going to have the ball in his hands for the most part. They also used Wack a lot of actions, but he's going to be the guy with the keys to this offense, and he's a plus passer. I think he's more of a combo shooting guard than a true point guard, like you said, but that's definitely what he projects in the NBA, at least is playing the two there. But Illinois uses him as their point guard, and he's their best ball handler. He's the most dynamic playmaker, so it makes sense. Even when Boswell was in the lineup, they kind of made that switch about a month into the season, and they've been a lot better since then. So, I don't. Do you have anything else on this matchup before we get into predictions?
Not really. Ken Palm has this game at 78-74 win for Purdue. I believe the betting lines are opening at 3.5, 2.5 ish, depending on where you're getting it at. You think Purdue covers the 4 points that Ken Palm's given them? What do you think happens in this game? Who wins?
I'm going to take Illinois in this game. I think this is a very much a coin flip game, in my opinion. I think these are two relatively evenly matched teams. Ask me who I thought is probably better overall, I would say Purdue, especially with Boswell out for Illinois. However, I think Illinois presents Purdue a lot of problems defensively, and Purdue has done nothing recently defensively that gives me any confidence that they could handle a good defensive matchup for them, let alone as one as bad as this. We saw how badly exposed Clough and Jacobson, and to an extent, Kaufman Wren got against UCLA defensively with those bigs on the perimeter. I think this is going to be more of the same. But just to an even more dramatic extent. After the game, the way Painter was talking, and it really sounded like they were happy with their defensive game plan, the way they covered those ball screens and the way they hedged. And he's like, Clough's got to be a little bit faster covering those. And I don't think Clough got a little bit faster in the last 4 days. They're just going to spam that action. And even if Purdue sells out to cover it, that's when they get backdoor cuts. That's when Purdue starts having to double in the paint when Wagler and Soakovic get downhill, and then they're kicking out to 43% Jake Davis and 37% whoever in the front court. So give me Illinois. I think it's going to be a very close game. I think it's going to come down to the final few minutes, but I think Illinois creates some separation in the last 5 or so minutes and ends up winning this game by about 6.
Yeah, I hate to do this. I think it's the first time I've picked against Purdue this year, but I am also going to pick Illinois. I think when you look at it, this is a really, really tough matchup for Purdue. It's a really, really, really tough matchup. A team that really, for as much as I think this conversation is a little bit overrated in how people frame it, is small in the backcourt. It's not the biggest, the longest, the most athletic backcourt in the country, and Illinois might be. So I think it's just gonna be a really tough matchup, and I think the swing piece to me really is Stojakovic. I'm just not sure that Purdue has anyone capable of slowing him down, especially with the recent, kind of trends of the defense. He does exactly what Purdue can't stop right now, and that's get downhill, get 2 feet in the paint, and finish at the rim. And Purdue at the moment has nothing for that. I think I'm going to take Illinois. I think this game comes down to the final play. I think this is like a Purdue has a look to win it and doesn't hit it. Give me Illinois like 84-82. I think it's a lower possession game that's super efficient offensively. I think both teams kind of get whatever they want. And at the end of the day, I think it comes down to Purdue's offense in late game situations seems to often be Braden mismatch hunting, and I'm not sure there's a mismatch on this Illinois team for Braden to hunt. And
yeah, one thing we didn't mention in the preview, I just want to tack on real quick before we get out of here. One thing we didn't mention earlier, both these teams play extremely slow. Illinois actually a little bit slower than Purdue. So Purdue fans were used to sort of like the super fast-paced running gun Illinois offenses of the past few years. This one's going to look a little different. They're a lot more methodical, and I think it's done wonders for their efficiency. Ken Pom certainly thinks so. So yeah, this could probably be a pretty low possession game, and whichever team is able to execute more efficiently on the few possessions they do get is going to be the one to take this one home.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this is and neither team really turns the other one is going to really turn the other one over. Neither team really wants to do that. Neither team really wants to run in transition at all. It's going to be a super efficient game. Don't be shocked if both teams are at like 1.4 points per possession or something like that. Like that wouldn't shock me whatsoever. I just think Stojakovic is going to be kind of the guy to make plays late and make shots. And as I was saying, like I think Braden might not be 100%, and that worries me about a team that has a lot of length and really no guy that I think he can just specifically switch on to and target on offense, which has been a lot of Purdue's late game offense recently. So for that reason, I think I'm going to take Illinois by 2. We'll see how this plays out for us. Both of us picking Illinois. I think this is a first for the channel. Both of us picking against Purdue. Even shocker, even though we covered football.
Even though we covered football back when that was something we cared about. Yeah, it's my dream that this podcast gets big enough that one day we're clipped, like all those channels are clipped with the little graphic at the bottom, and Purdue basketball official Twitter is using us and the little montage after a big win. All the doubters, some Purdue podcast jackasses here in the back are picking Illinois in a perfect matchup for them. I know, crazy, but
Yeah, this is a desperate spot for Purdue. We didn't really mention this in the preview, but at this point in the season, we're 8 games into the Big Ten play. We're still looking up at Nebraska being 8-0 in the Big Ten, and they've already seen this Illinois team. They've seen Michigan State, so it's going to be an upward climb for Purdue, and this is a little bit of a desperation spot for both teams if they want to keep pace at the top of the Big Ten. So this is an old fashioned Big Ten heavyweight clash, and when that happens, it's must see TV. These are two legit top 10 teams, and I really, regardless of the outcome of this game, as a basketball fan first, I can't wait for this game. So,
absolutely.
on that note, thanks for listening, everyone. Be sure to be on the lookout for the recap that will come out shortly after this game. We're excited to watch this one with you guys. So this recap should potentially be up pretty quick, especially now that football season's winding down. We're finding somewhat of a little bit more free time. So yeah, hopefully we have a very positive recap and can get out of here with a win and keeping pace with Nebraska. But we'll be here regardless of the score. So thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll see you later.